When his wife keeps throwing away the food his beloved mother cooked for them, this husband installs a camera in the kitchen to investigate her motives. It doesn't take him long to discover the horrifying reason, and what he finds out forces him to make a terrible choice. Marcus stood in the doorway, his jaw clenched as he watched his wife Elaine scrape another plate of his mother's signature risotto into the garbage disposal. The $100 worth of premium Italian ingredients, aged Parmigiano Reggiano, imported Carnaroli rice, and precious saffron threads, disappeared down the drain with a grinding noise that seemed to echo his mounting frustration. "Elaine, what are you doing?" His voice was tight with barely contained anger, the words coming out more harshly than he intended. That was Mom's special risotto. She spent hours making it, stirring it constantly to achieve that perfect consistency despite the pain in her arm. "You do remember she has arthritis, don't you?" Elaine's hands trembled slightly as she rinsed the empty plate, droplets of water splashing against the stainless steel sink. Her delicate fingers, usually so steady when handling precious artifacts at the gallery, seemed unusually clumsy. She didn't turn to face him, keeping her gaze fixed on the running water. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I couldn't eat it." The thought of putting it in my mouth made my stomach turn. "This is the third time this month. Do you have any idea how much that cost? More importantly, do you know how much it hurts Mom's feelings?" Marcus ran his fingers through his dark, thick hair in exasperation, a habit he'd inherited from his father. "She asks about you every time I see her, wondering if you're feeling all right, if there's something wrong with her cooking." When Elaine finally turned around, her face was pale as fine porcelain, and her eyes were rimmed with red, making the usual bright green of her irises seem dull and lifeless. For a moment, Marcus thought he saw fear flash across her features before she quickly composed herself, smoothing her expression like she would smooth the wrinkles from a valuable painting's canvas. "I said I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the humming of the kitchen appliances. She pushed past him to leave the kitchen, her shoulder barely brushing against his chest. "I'm going to bed. I have an early meeting tomorrow." Marcus watched her retreat, noticing how her shoulders hunched forward protectively, like a wounded animal expecting another blow. Something wasn't right. The Elaine he knew would never be so wasteful or disrespectful. She used to love his mother's cooking. In fact, it was one of the things that had first drawn them together, her genuine appreciation for authentic Italian cuisine. As he stared at the empty plate in the sink, water droplets still clinging to its surface, a decision crystallized in his mind. He needed answers, and if Elaine wouldn't give them to him, he would find them another way. The thought made him uncomfortable. Surveillance felt like a betrayal of trust, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was lurking beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life. Marcus and Elaine's love story had begun 3 years ago at his mother Isabella's renowned Italian restaurant in downtown Chicago, a warm and inviting establishment that had been in the family for 2 generations. The restaurant, with its checkered tablecloths and walls adorned with vintage Italian posters, was a slice of old-world charm in the midst of the city's modern sophistication. Elaine had been a regular customer, often stopping by for lunch during her breaks from the nearby art gallery where she worked as a curator, her artistic eye appreciating both the food's presentation and its authentic flavors. Isabella had taken an immediate liking to the young woman with the warm smile and appreciation for authentic Italian cuisine. She would often send extra dishes to Elaine's table, delighting in how the young woman's face would light up with each new taste, how she would close her eyes in pleasure at the first bite of freshly made pasta or the rich depth of a properly aged sauce. It was Isabella who had played matchmaker, constantly telling Marcus about the lovely girl with the excellent taste in food who visited the restaurant, describing Elaine's genuine enthusiasm for their family's culinary heritage. When Marcus finally met Elaine, the connection was instant, like the perfect marriage of wine and cheese. Their first date lasted 5 hours, conversation flowing as naturally as the wine they shared, touching on everything from art history to family traditions to their shared love of travel. Within 6 months, they were engaged, and their wedding was a joyous celebration of family, love, and, of course, Isabella's incredible cooking. The reception menu had been a showcase of her finest dishes, each one representing a different region of Italy. The first year of marriage had been blissful, filled with the kind of happiness that made everyday moments feel magical. They moved into a comfortable apartment in a historic building, its high ceilings and large windows perfect for displaying Elaine's carefully curated collection of local artwork. Elaine quickly adapted to life as part of their close-knit Italian-American family, embracing their traditions with enthusiasm and genuine interest. Sunday dinners at Isabella's became a cherished tradition, the kitchen filled with warmth, laughter, and the irresistible aromas of simmering sauces and freshly baked bread. Elaine eagerly learned traditional recipes from her mother-in-law, her notebook filled with carefully recorded instructions and family secrets passed down through generations. The changes began subtly, about 14 months into their marriage, like a hairline crack in a precious vase that slowly spreads until the whole piece threatens to shatter. It started with Elaine making excuses to miss Sunday dinners. A migraine here, a work emergency there, each excuse plausible but somehow hollow. She developed stomach issues she'd never suffered from before, but no doctor seemed able to understand the reason behind them. Marcus thought some homemade food would do wonders for her, just like it had always done for him as a child. But when Isabella would bring over homemade meals, carefully packed in her best containers, Elaine would claim she wasn't hungry or had already eaten. Initially, Marcus attributed it to work stress. Elaine had recently been promoted to senior curator and was handling bigger exhibitions, her days filled with meetings, artist negotiations, and gallery preparations. But then he began finding untouched containers of his mother's food in the trash, the carefully prepared meals hidden beneath coffee grounds and paper towels, as if Elaine were trying to conceal evidence of a crime. When confronted, Elaine would become evasive, her usual articulate nature dissolving into vague excuses about the food not agreeing with her stomach. Her eyes would dart away from his, focusing on anything but his face, her fingers fidgeting with her wedding ring in a nervous gesture he'd never seen before. The final straw was watching her dispose of not one, but 2 portions of his mother's specially prepared risotto, a dish that had once made Elaine's eyes light up with pleasure. The sight of the creamy rice disappearing down the drain felt like watching their marriage dissolving along with it. Marcus had tried everything to understand what was wrong. He'd asked Elaine directly if she had developed any food allergies, suggested they visit a doctor together, and questioned if something had happened between her and his mother that he should know about. Each time she would close up like a museum after hours, sometimes breaking into tears before locking herself in their bedroom, leaving him to stare at the closed door and wonder what secrets lay behind it. The situation was taking its toll on their marriage, transforming their once peaceful home into a minefield of unspoken tensions and avoided conversations. The warm, open communication they had once shared had been replaced by tense silences and avoided glances. Their evening routine, once filled with shared meals and comfortable conversation, had devolved into Elaine working late at the gallery and Marcus eating alone, staring at her empty chair. Isabella, too, was hurt by Elaine's apparent rejection of her cooking, though she tried to hide it behind concerned inquiries about her daughter-in-law's health. Marcus could see the pain in his mother's eyes each time he had to make another excuse for Elaine's absence at Sunday dinner, could hear the forced cheerfulness in her voice when she would say, "Well, maybe next week." The woman who had built a successful restaurant from nothing, who had raised him single-handedly after his father's death, seemed to diminish slightly with each rejection. Marcus felt torn between the 2 most important women in his life, caught in a conflict he didn't understand and couldn't resolve. He loved Elaine deeply, their connection having grown stronger through shared experiences and challenges. But his mother had raised him single-handedly after his father's death, working long hours at her restaurant to give him the best life possible. Watching Elaine repeatedly discard his mother's lovingly prepared meals felt like a betrayal of both their family's heritage and the woman who had sacrificed so much for him. After 2 weeks of agonizing over his decision, wrestling with guilt and moral implications, Marcus finally installed a small camera in their kitchen. He positioned it carefully to capture both the counter where Isabella usually laid out her ingredients when she visited, and the area around the sink where Elaine had been disposing of the meals. The tiny lens, nearly invisible against the kitchen's crown molding, felt like both a solution and a betrayal. The opportunity to review the footage came sooner than expected. Isabella arrived the following evening with her famous homemade gnocchi, another of Elaine's former favorites. The potato dumplings were perfectly formed, each piece bearing the distinctive ridges made by Isabella's skilled fingers, a technique she'd tried to teach Elaine just months ago. Marcus watched the familiar scene unfold, his mother bustling around the kitchen in her flour-dusted apron, Elaine making polite excuses to stay in the living room, focused intently on gallery paperwork, and finally, the inevitable sound of the garbage disposal after Isabella left. That night, after Elaine went to bed, claiming another headache, Marcus sat down at his computer with trembling hands. The soft glow of the monitor illuminated his face as he connected to the camera's feed. He fast-forwarded through hours of mundane kitchen activity, Elaine making her morning coffee, the cleaning service tidying up, the afternoon light moving across the counter, until he reached the footage of his mother's visit. What he saw made his blood run cold, the revelation hitting him like a physical blow. Isabella had arrived with her usual warm smile and bags of groceries, her silver-streaked hair neatly styled, wearing the gold cross necklace Marcus had given her for Christmas. She chatted animatedly while setting up her ingredients, commenting on the weather and sharing neighborhood gossip. But when Elaine briefly left the room to answer a phone call from the gallery, Isabella's demeanor changed completely, like an actor dropping character when the cameras stop rolling. Her warm smile vanished, replaced by a look of calculated determination. She quickly reached into her purse and pulled out a small vial, adding several drops of a clear liquid to the sauce she was preparing. When Elaine returned, Isabella was back to her cheerful self, as if nothing had happened, demonstrating the proper way to roll the gnocchi with the same hands that had just administered what could only be poison. Marcus watched the scene 3 times, each viewing making his stomach clenched tighter. He was trying to convince himself he was seeing things wrong, that there must be some innocent explanation, but there was no mistaking what he had witnessed. His mother, the woman who had taught him that food was love, who had built her life around nourishing others, was deliberately tampering with Elaine's meals. Suddenly, all the pieces fell into place with horrifying clarity. Elaine's increasing reluctance to eat his mother's food, her mysterious stomach issues, the tears, the fear in her eyes. She had known something was wrong but hadn't wanted to come between him and his mother, choosing instead to suffer in silence rather than risk destroying his relationship with his only remaining parent. "How long have you known?" Marcus turned to find Elaine standing in the doorway, wrapped in her pale blue robe, her face ghostly in the computer's light. Her long hair was loose around her shoulders, and her feet were bare against the hardwood floor. She must have heard him reviewing the footage, the sound of his mother's familiar voice carrying through their quiet apartment. "I just found out," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you carry this burden alone?" She moved closer, tears streaming down her face, leaving silvery tracks on her cheeks. "I tried to figure out what she was adding. I even sent samples to be tested, but nothing showed up. The lab said whatever it was must metabolize too quickly to detect. I started throwing away the food because I was afraid to eat it, but I couldn't prove anything. I thought you would never believe me over your mother. She's your only family, Marcus. I couldn't bear to be the one who destroyed that." Marcus pulled her into his arms, feeling her body shake with suppressed sobs, the weight of betrayal and shock pulsing between them like a tangible force. "I'm so sorry," he whispered into her hair, his voice a mixture of raw anguish and protective tenderness. Each word carried the burden of a family secret just violently exposed, a betrayal that cut deeper than any physical wound. "I should have protected you. I should have seen what was happening." Elaine pulled back slightly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, revealing a vulnerability that belied her usual strength. Her fingers trembled as she wiped away the evidence of her emotional turmoil, leaving faint trails of moisture on her cheeks. "What are we going to do?" she asked, her voice a soft whisper that held both fear and determination. Marcus's jaw set in a line of granite-like determination, his Mediterranean heritage evident in the passionate intensity of his expression. "First, we're going to the police with this footage. Then we're getting a restraining order. I don't care if she's my mother. She tried to poison my wife." "Marcus." Elaine's voice was gentle but firm, a balance of compassion and resolve that had defined their relationship from the beginning. "Before we do anything, I think we need to confront her. We need to understand why." The next morning, they invited Isabella over, a decision that hung between an act of courage and an emotional trial. When she arrived carrying another bag of groceries, a symbol of maternal care that now felt like a grotesque mockery, Marcus couldn't help but notice how devastatingly normal she looked. She was every bit the loving mother one might see in a nostalgic family photograph. Perfectly pressed blouse, carefully applied makeup, a smile that had masked generations of complicated family expectations. "Mom," Marcus said, his voice a carefully modulated instrument of controlled emotion, "we need to talk about what you've been adding to Elaine's food." Isabella's smile faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered. Marcus placed his laptop on the table and played the footage. Isabella's face drained of color as she watched herself adding the clear liquid to the sauce. "Why, Mom?" Marcus's voice cracked. "Why would you do this to Elaine?" Isabella's carefully maintained facade crumbled. She sank into a chair, her shoulders slumping. "I just wanted to protect you," she whispered. "Protect me? By poisoning my wife?" "It wasn't poison," Isabella protested. "Just something to cause mild stomach upset. I thought if Elaine couldn't handle my cooking, you would see she wasn't right for you, that she wasn't strong enough to be part of our family." Elaine, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "Mrs. Romano, I have always respected you. I loved you like a second mother. Why wasn't I good enough?" Isabella wouldn't meet their eyes. "You're not Italian," she said finally. "Our family has been in the restaurant business for generations. I wanted Marcus to marry someone who would carry on our traditions, who understood our culture deeply. Someone who would love to be a wife and mother instead of spending so many hours at work." "So you decided to poison me rather than accept that your son married someone who had her own dreams?" Elaine's voice was sharp with hurt and anger. Marcus placed a hand on Elaine's shoulder, then turned to his mother. "Mom, what you did is unforgivable. Elaine is my wife, and I love her exactly as she is. She doesn't need to give up her career or change who she is to be part of this family. If you can't accept that, then you're the one who isn't strong enough to be part of our family." Isabella began to cry, but Marcus hardened his heart against her tears. "We're not going to press the charges," he continued, "but you need to get help, professional help. Until you do, and until you can prove to us that you've changed, you're not welcome in our home or our lives." As they watched Isabella leave, Elaine leaned against Marcus. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Marcus pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "No," he admitted, "but we will be. I'm just grateful I didn't lose you before I discovered the truth." That evening, as they sat together in their kitchen, Marcus watched Elaine prepare a simple pasta dish. She wasn't using any fancy ingredients or traditional Italian techniques, but to Marcus it was the most beautiful meal he'd ever seen because it was made with love and truth. "You know," Elaine said, stirring the sauce, "maybe someday we could open a small cafe. Not a traditional Italian restaurant, but a place that combines your family's recipes with other cuisines, something that's uniquely ours." Marcus smiled, feeling hope for the first time in weeks. They would build their own traditions, their own definition of family, and they would do it together, without secrets or fear, just love and acceptance. What a shocking betrayal. Have you ever encountered a situation where family traditions or expectations conflicted with personal happiness? Share your experiences, insights, and reflections in the comments below. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to join us for more exciting stories like this one.